Hi, everybody. Welcome to Quarantine Parenting. My name is Dr. Courtney Pegram, and I do this scrappy YouTube TV. And today I have a great person that I'm so excited to introduce. She's a secondary counselor, and she's going to kind of tell us of some of the trends she's seeing in our school and give us some tips as parents of what we can do as we transition into phase 3 and we start lifting the shelter in place. So I'd love to introduce Jessica Dattalo. Jessica, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Courtney. Our school has loved working with you throughout the last 2 years and what you've brought to our school community. So yes, I am the secondary school counselor at the Lycee Francais de Chicago. I work with grades 6 through 12 for their social emotional learning and development, both individually and in the school-wide assembly formats. So thank you for having me. And yeah, as far as what we're seeing as we transition into phase 3, it is really all over the map. So for some students and some families, this has been a really welcomed pause in their lives to slow down, to have time together, to reassess what's important to them. And for other families, this has been just the most challenging thing in the world. It has been incredibly difficult, not only to navigate the schedule of who has access to the computer when, but it is also it's been a hard time to have multiple family members in one spot. As something else we've been seeing is difficulty with social isolation. And with this, I think for a lot of parents, as we do transition into phase 3 and things begin to open up, we need to really be careful that we are doing it smartly and doing it in ways that are helpful and safe for everyone. Because I would imagine if I was a parent and I've been having fights with my kid every day about needing to stay home and not go outside, the second things open, we might have the urge to automatically let them go. And I think with all of this, there's no right answer. Every family and every student is going to make the decisions that are right for them. And that's why today it's really helpful for us to talk with parents about taking some time to think about what exactly does look right for their family. Because when we have that map, when we have that the printout of what that could look like, it will help us in those difficult situations when we are having difficult times with our kids to come back to that floor plan, basically that map, that compass of how to navigate when the stressors do arise with the upcoming transitions.
Wow, yeah, like I totally agree with you. It's really important to have some sort of plan, a layout of what to do. And it is like, I mean, being a parent, like, I know I just want to be like, go to your friends, right? And because parents, what's going to happen to us is we're going to still have to somehow either work remotely or get daycare because, our kids are out of school. So if I was to think about this plan, what do you think is important to have in a plan as my family transitions into lifting the shelter in place?
Yeah. So I think it's important to think about what your family's values are, and it is totally okay if they are different than other families' values. One thing that I think a lot of society had a great reprieve from during the shelter in place was the absence of comparing to others and the absence of what's called FOMO. So for the parents out there, it's the fear of missing out, which is something that really, really plagues our teens. And I think that we're going to see that start coming up again. And I think comparisons and fear of judgment from others is the destruction of what we need to be doing. So what is really important for families is to think about what your values are, and also to think about the risk factors within your own family. So this might look different for a family who maybe has already been exposed, or different for a family who has had essential workers working throughout this whole time. It might look different for a family who has grandparents living in their house or wants to access grandparents in the future. It can look different. It might look different for a family who does have pre-existing conditions or is immunocompromised. But I think it's really important to know that the right decisions to make as we move into phase 3 does look different for everyone. And taking some of these things into consideration can really help families feel safer and feel more confident as they move forward with the next step of this.
Yeah, so it really sounds like everyone is different. Every family is different, every
Yep.
situation is different, and it's really not time to place judgment, but to reevaluate how we will operate as a family.
Mm-hmm.
So I like what you said, and kind of looking at the family values. So for parents out there, they're like, how do I even tell my kids about family values? We've never had this talk. What are some ideas that, or even like prompts that I could use as a parent to help me kind of get the values out of my family and then start setting expectations or even house rules of how we'll operate?
Right. Right, definitely. So values are something that can always change. They're never necessarily set in stone, but it's thinking about the things that are most important to you. So maybe to your family, you really, really value the idea of community, the idea of respect, the idea of empathy, or maybe you really value, I'm trying to think of some, like, or maybe family is a really strong value, and that might look like different things. And to take family as a strong value, for you, that might look like we value family so much that we want to make sure that we're able to see each other throughout the summer. Or it might look different, and you might say we value family so much that we don't want to put our family members at risk. So we'll continue to engage in the Zoom sessions, or wearing our masks and staying 6 feet apart. So not only are we figuring out what's most important to us, but we're also figuring out what that looks like in the next step.
Oh, I love that. I really, really love that. Okay, so let me recap. So the idea is I would sit down with my family and kind of figure out what is important to us as a family. So, and then identify those values. So like maybe it's family, respect, it could be like, you know, adventure, whatever comes up.
Right.
Communication. So then you said, and I love this part, to define what that means. So communication might be, hey, we're going to communicate via Zoom still because, our family is like, can't be exposed because we have elderly people in the house. And so we're going to do Zoom and we'll communicate with 6 feet apart with masks. Those are the strategies we will communicate. But then, like you said, other families might be like, hey, we're okay seeing our close family members and friends and keeping it under 10. So that really made sense of how to break it down. When we do this, like, how do we start explaining to our teens, and just because we both work with a ton of teens, that people will do things differently so that FOMO doesn't come up again, and that judgment and criticism and like all that negativity, how can I contain that?
Right. Absolutely. So I think I always operate from the perspective that teens are a lot more mature than sometimes we give them credit for. And when we explain the why for why rules or expectations are in place, they actually feel they understand the reason behind it. So any teenage brain, when we just tell them you cannot do this, their automatic reaction is going to be to want to do it as they're finding their independence and autonomy. But if we engage them in the conversation, so having that conversation as a family of what is important to us. And this doesn't mean letting them make all the rules, but including them in the discussion about it can help them feel more empowered in the fact that they're looking at what is important to the family together. They're helping set the expectations. And then, as I mentioned, the most important thing for teenagers is understanding the why behind it. So it's not like these expectations or rules for a family came out of thin air. They're getting to see the process and use their brains to understand how the family came to the conclusion together for those expectations for the family. And then just really stressing that when it comes to FOMO, there's always going to be things that are happening. Unfortunately, social media makes us aware that there's things happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we may always be missing out on something. So once teenagers can accept that they can't be multiple places at once, and that it's helping them refocus in the moment that they are in, it can help alleviate a lot of the stress and anxiety that comes from feeling like everyone else is having more fun or doing cooler things than they are.
Yeah, like that like resonates with me because I think we often skip the why. We're like, just because I said so, like just do it. And I mean, if I got that as an answer as an adult, I'd be like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. So let me just do it. So that just really creates like that clarity for teens. Like this is why, and I like how you tied it back like to the family values because then there's more buy-in. Um, and I think you're right with social media. As a parent, like you compare yourselves to other parents who's rocking homeschool, who's like, so I think kids do the same thing. And I mean, because they model what we do. So how, when it comes to like, we can't take social media away, we can't, like, what are some transition statement or ideas that we can explain to our kids that, you know, beyond the why, or like some things we can say to them to comfort them as we might not be following the same rules as the other families.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's why including them in the conversation for the why. So for example, let's say that we do have a grandparent living in our home. I would explain, we are taking extended precautions because you know how much we love grandma, and connecting it back to a time of like their relationship with grandma. And for this reason, this is why we are taking these extra precautions. Whereas it could look different if grandma wasn't living with us, but just really trying to explain in those very specific and concrete ways. Connecting back to the purpose about it.
Okay, so being concrete, being simple, being clear, and giving examples, because I would understand if you talked about, grandma versus like just saying like this is how it's going to be for now.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the buy-in aspect. Now, as we transition into phase 3, so we talked about like how things are going to change, and as humans, this transition in general is just not we don't do well unless there's structure and some sort of repetition or consistency. So now we're starting with kind of like, woo, everything's uncertain. What is some advice for parents on how to deal with the uncertainty and maybe even some of our own anxiety? What can we do as parents to help our teens?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the transition because transitions for all humans are the most difficult parts of life. So whenever it comes to increased levels of anxiety, increased levels of depression, increased maladaptive coping, it's always surrounding some form of a transition or major life change. Unfortunately, in the state of COVID, it's been a constant transition. So we've definitely seen a lot of that arising. But at this time, we all just adjusted to what life would look like in a functioning way with the shelter in place order in place. We all just worked out all of the stickiness, all of the kinks, all of the arguments that have been coming up over the past 2 or so months. And from what I'm hearing from in my professional work is that everyone kind of just found the way to cruise in this new normal. And what makes it super challenging is that now everything that we've just gotten used to is just starting to change again. And now there's just starting to be more uncertainty again. And so I wish that there was a magic answer to it. But all I can say is that in the same way, families worked out ways to find the structure that worked for everyone, the schedule that worked for everyone, the increased communication that allowed the structure and schedule that worked for everyone to take place. This is going to be another area where that needs to happen. And there's transitions, like I said, they're always going to be sticky, and this one comes with a little bit more uncertainty. And I'm not saying that to scare any parents or frustrate any parents. It's just that before we had this idea and everyone throughout society was on the same page if we would all be staying at home, this one is going to come with a little bit more uncertainty and a little bit more of those indecisions or the family-based choices that come, which is why also having those values and those discussions together with the family around the family values will be, like I said, that guiding compass in how to navigate this transition.
Right, that makes sense because, I could relate to what you're saying so much, because like I finally got this down. Like
Right.
I got it. Schedule, homeschool, work remote, and now I'm like, it's all gonna change. So my anxiety increased. And it's kind of like every day I wake up, like like what's gonna happen tomorrow, or what's, because it's, we don't have any answers. So like as a parent not having any answers, how do I explain that to my teenagers?
Well, so something else that came to mind is when we have anxiety and when we have uncertainty, there's two antidotes to that. So the first one is thinking of what is in our control versus what is out of our control. Because anxiety comes from when we can't control things and we don't know what will happen. So for a parent, this can look like what is in my control is how I communicate with my kids. It is how we schedule time together. It is us finding what our family values are and how we move forward. Those are things that we can do. What's out of our control is what all other families are doing, what choices society is making, whether or not the virus really continues to be on a decline or if it ramps up again. Like those are all things that are out of our control, and anxiety stems from the worry around that. The other thing that I love to tell people, and this is for students and parents alike, we always have control of our own coping skills that we choose to use as well. So whether that is a coping skill of deciding to take a few deep breaths in the moment, or deciding to practice self-care throughout the day, even if it, I know for parents it's impossible, but even if it's 5 minutes of doing something enjoyable, such as like sitting outside on getting some sunlight, even if that's getting it in through the windows. But when we're anxious and uncertain, we need to focus on what's in our control and what's out of our control. Um, the other antidote to uncertainty and anxiety is really being present in the current moment. So that may look like engaging in something like mindfulness or meditation, or even some yoga. I know there's a bunch of yoga online tutorials available right now. It may look like spending time with your kids or watching a movie and like really being engaged in that moment together and soaking in everything that you can notice in that moment. So whenever our minds start to wander and spiral, we can focus on what's in our control and out of our control. And what is in our control is really focusing on all the things in the present moment that we do have.
Oh, I love that. So I really love what's in your control, what's out of your control, because it gives really that concept of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And I think now more than ever, we have to have a growth mindset about what's going on and what can, and if you identify what you're in control, it sounds like what you're saying too is then you can be in the present moment and realize, no, by thinking about stuff that's in the future, I have no control, or thinking about the stuff that I should have, could have, would have done is not helpful either. So I like how you frame that in the present moment, like this is where I am. And also the deep breathing. I think we forget to breathe when we're anxious. So as parents, and we've seen our teenagers like just get so ramped up and they're not breathing. So I think just a few deep breaths. I like the self-care, and I think that parents need to hear it not just from me or just like, but we really need to practice that. And like you said, it could be 5 minutes, just take your dog for a walk, or go outside, get some sunlight, just get some peace of mind, right? Especially if you're like in a crowded house. So I think that's really good, because then you're setting the tone for your kids too, that we do need breaks, right? We just can't function 100%, especially remotely. So I love that. That was really powerful, those strategies. I appreciate that. Um, so as we're closing up, like what are maybe some ideas, concepts, or things that I didn't mention that you think that's important to share to parents?
So one thing that just came to my mind as you were sharing was, another value could look like the value of resilience. And in my work, I don't know any family that doesn't have this value of resilience and perseverance, and of hard work. And I think it can also be really powerful to connect that value for kids right now. because this is all a resilience building lesson. As tragic as this is, and I will never say this isn't tragic, there is so much to learn about how much we can handle, how much we can cope with, how much we can choose to be kind and caring for others even when it's difficult right now. And if families do have resilience as a value, then it's so easy to connect that for them and to help them think about, wow, if you can handle this, which you have been doing successfully for the last 3 months, imagine how much you'll be able to handle in the future when you do go to college, when you are in a job, when you do have difficult interactions down the road, like to really help them think about the long-term benefits. We talk about consequences a lot, but the long-term benefits that they can gain from the resilience that they're building at this time.
Yeah, I love that. I know we always joke about if you survive middle school, you win at life. So now it's kind of like, hey, we survived this huge pandemic as a family and we're closer than ever, or we've learned so much about each other. Like that's something to be celebrated and we can get through anything together. I like that message of like, because I think as a family, we're always trying to teach our kids about resilience, but we don't realize that we're actually like modeling it now. We're adapting, like, and kind of tying back to what you said in the beginning. It's like we were thrown to this shelter in place and we had to figure it out. And like, parents, educators, everyone's like our superheroes. They're just like, okay, what do I do? How do I do it? And so I like how you talked about just realizing that there's a lot of resilience, and that gave me an idea too. And I wanted to play off this. What do you think? What about like having a discussion with your kids about like what do you want to be like as this ends? Like, what do you want to take away from this experience? Do you think those are powerful discussions to have with our kids?
Yeah. I mean, I think absolutely. What do you hope that we learn after this? What parts of this shelter in place and this quarantine do you hope that you or our family takes with us from this experience into whatever life looks like down the road? What parts did you hate and you hope we leave? Absolutely, asking those questions can be another part of the process. And another thing that I didn't mention is with this time, like it has looked so different for everyone. So right now we're talking about people just, who the whole world is working at figuring out how to transition into the next phase. And what I didn't mean to skip over is that there's also been so many families terribly, terribly impacted by grief and loss of loved ones, by struggling financial situations, by uncertainty for what finances will look like in the future. And it is also right now, I think that mental health support and counseling is more available and accessible than ever. So I just want to make that plug for people right now too, whether it's for parents who are having a lot of emotions or difficulties right now, families, students, mental health support and counseling is not only available through telehealth, so you can do it from the comfort of your home, but a lot of insurances are actually waiving any copays. So it's actually right now during the pandemic being fully covered. So I also just always like to make sure that parents know that that's an option as well.
Yeah, I think that's super important to mention because we need some outlets to like talk about some of this stuff, the stress. And you're right, for the people that were impacted with family loss, financial loss, not having the resources to kind of figure it out. So it's really important to like acknowledge that and then say like there is a ton of help for like mental wellness right now. Right. So thank you for reminding me about that. That's really important. So any closing thoughts or ideas as we end this interview, this amazing interview? I have all these strategies right now. I'm so excited. But do you have any closing thoughts?
My closing thought is just I'm thinking about this silly shirt that I ordered online, and I was going to wear it today, and of course I forgot. But the quote was, "Grow through what you go through," and this connects to the resilience piece. And there's, of course, this has been so tragic, but I also think that our students and our families will only come out stronger on the other end, given all the lessons that we learned. And as parents, it's not our job to take the difficult emotions away. or try to have a magic wand to fix them. Our job is to sit with them in it and show them that we are resilient and we all as humans have these emotions. And like you mentioned, modeling that like together as a society, as a community, as extending support where we can. That's what I hope that this generation takes as they move forward.
Right. That's really powerful. Like I really like how you put that. It gives a sense of like, it's like almost like a spin to see like there's things to come. I'm gonna grow from this, you know. And I love your shirt too, by the way. That's a great shirt. So well, thank you so much for all the great advice, the strategies. I'm gonna work on my family meeting, right? We're gonna go through the values. We're gonna create clear expectations and like ground rules. And I think as parents, this is a must do. You can't even skip over this part. So that's a huge takeaway for me. And also, it's so great to see you and hang out, even though through Zoom. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Courtney.
Talk to you soon. Thanks. Okay, bye.